Welcome to the Cohesive Home podcast interview series. In our debut episode, Kate chats with Calli Birch, wife, mother, entrepreneur, and champion of ethical fashion. She opens up about her journey from overworked school teacher to homeschool mom and entrepreneur, and also shares some great tips on how to start purchasing with purpose and buying ethically. So without further ado, here's Kate's interview with Calli of Storyweaver Mercantile.
So I am so thrilled to host Calli Birch for our first Cohesive Home interview. Calli and I met actually online.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, did you reach out to me?
Yes, I did. I read your Wild and Free article.
Yes.
This is about a year ago now, I think. Because I believe it was about 2 or 3 months after we moved to Arkansas. So that would be a year ago. And I read one of your Wild and Free articles, and it resonated with me. And I felt like we had a lot in common. And then I read your bio and saw that you were also a teacher. And I thought, hey, we have a lot in common. I'm going to reach. And you have 2 girls.
Yes.
So, which I do as well. And so I think I just contacted you on Instagram. I think I actually just followed you and commented on a couple of things. And then you, I think, went and read one of my blog posts and left me a comment on my blog.
Yes, because I checked out your blog and I thought, oh, we are just kindred spirits. And I felt like we had so much in common. And so that's really, I mean, we've pretty much just had an Instagram friendship, but it has really blossomed over the last year, especially as Calli has started her business, which she'll explain more about here shortly, and as Melissa and I have started Cohesive Home.
Which they coincided, really.
Yes.
I think we both launched our projects around the same time and kind of were fans of each other.
Yeah, you know what? I think it was around Black Friday last year, right? With the start of the shopping season.
Yes.
It was good timing for both of us.
It was. Yes. My mother, the entrepreneur woman, told me that if I was going to really do this, then I needed to either launch before Black Friday or I needed to wait 9 months and launch way later because it
Thanks, Mom.
I know. She said, in retail, it doesn't make any sense for you to launch in January or February. Those are like the slowest months, yada, yada, yada.
Of course, yeah. Well, thank goodness you.
Myself.
Yeah, so good you had her advice. Well, so I'm sure those of you who are listening are so curious to learn more about Calli. So Calli, do you want to go ahead and tell everyone listening a little bit more about just you and your family's story?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to tell some of the story that relates to Storyweaver to kind of show how there are random connected aspects of my story to my business. So, okay. I was raised by a medical missionary dad. My dad's a doctor, and we did medical missions all growing up. And then in high school, my whole family picked up and moved to Guatemala. And that was for 1 year. We lived in Guatemala, but that was a really life-changing experience for me. And I really believe that planted the seeds of desiring to make an impact in the world and having a passion for travel and adventure. And so whenever I went off to college, I had a strong desire to study abroad. And I studied at Oxford for a summer and traveled all over, backpacked, back when you could sleep in train stations, all over Europe. And a buddy of mine, we just lived on a shoestring, and we would go like buy a baguette and a little jar of pesto, and that would be our lunch because we wanted to spend all of our money on the experiences, on the museum fees and another train ticket. And so it was this amazing summer. So I came home from that just so energized and ready to take on the world, and I had a very idealistic view, probably a little naive as well,
like most of us do at that age.
at I guess that would have been 19. So and after I got home, I I was walking across campus one night and went back just to my car, and this really cute guy stopped me and asked me for directions to the study abroad program. And so this guy ended up being my husband.
Oh,
fast forward a long
so
time.
sweet.
Our very first conversation was about how when I had been in Oxford, he had been on an archaeological dig in Israel, and we both just wanted to travel and see the world and do good and do missions.
Yeah.
And that really was our kind of the spark between us in that very first conversation. He asked me on our first date before we left then. And so anyway, whenever we got married, we knew we wanted to live abroad. And so my husband applied to an international relations master's program in London, and we moved to London our second year of marriage. And while he was working on his master's degree, I had just finished my undergraduate.
Okay.
And my first teaching job was teaching in the British education system, teaching English in the British education system. And we were actually in Essex, kind of on the outskirts of London. And this is where the Cockneys are.
Right.
And so it took me a few weeks to actually understand some of the things they were saying. And I had to learn the slang because I knew that they were saying things that were inappropriate in class.
I'm sure they loved that.
It was hilarious. And I just absolutely adored these kids. And they loved that I was a Texan. They thought that was so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
But this particular school was in a neighborhood that had government housing for refugees. And so about 50% of my students were refugees from all over, really all over the world, but mostly Africa, Eastern Bloc, Europe, and some of the Middle East. Multiple different countries, and I just fell in love with these kids. Yeah. And that was the heart of that year for me, was connecting with these refugee kids and really trying to teach them to read English. I mean, I was teaching 8th and 9th grade, a little bit of 10th, and I had several of these refugee kids who still they could speak fine in English, but they weren't fully literate readers.
Wow.
Are definitely not fluent readers, right? And so that was an amazing experience. So we moved back to Dallas after that year. We were excited to come back, but a little bit sad to leave the adventure behind.
Right.
It was like, okay, let's become grown-ups and
buy the house, have the kids, right?
Exactly. So the truth is, we only thought we were going to be in Dallas for a couple years, and my husband was kind of pursuing his dream international relations job, which really his heart was in humanitarian development. His thesis had been on international development. So anyway, we thought we were buying time. And in the meantime, I landed my dream job very unexpectedly and almost accidentally at an all-girl school, independent school, that a lot of people would call it a prep school.
Right.
Basically, what happened is I had met someone from the school, and she had told me there was an English teacher position that was open and I should apply. And on a complete whim, thinking, there's no way I'm going to get this job.
Right.
But sure, I'll write a great cover letter and I will see what happens and just probably never hear from them again. And 6 interviews later, it was like trying to get into the FBI. I somehow got this job. And I remember the beginning of that summer going, did this really happen? Am I really at 25 going to have this job? And oh my gosh, they're going to find out I'm not good enough. How in the world did this happen?
I know that feeling, right?
Yeah. So I worked at that school for the next 7 years. And in so many ways, it was amazing and life-changing and grew me up. Yeah. I feel like I was given an education, probably learned more teaching there than I did with both my undergraduate master's degree combined.
Right. Real life.
Yeah, real life, trial under fire, right? And very demanding. It was a very high-pressure culture. And there were high stakes, kids who were trying to get into big name schools, Ivy Leagues, and parents who were spending all these thousands of dollars for them to get this education so that they would get into these Ivy League schools.
Of course, yeah.
And very long hours. So when my first child was born, because there was a daycare on campus, I was able to still run over there and nurse. And I thought, oh, man, this is awesome. This is great.
Right.
I've got
great setup.
Yeah. I was so grateful. But as time passed, as I was given more responsibilities, as I had been there longer, and wasn't given really permission to say no whenever I was asked to take on added responsibilities.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a situation like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Having taught at a private high school myself, way back before I had kids, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Which is something we've talked about before.
Yes. So how did that impact you as being a new mother?
Well, for the first, with Ellie, with my firstborn, I actually think it made me a better teacher. I was constantly trying to rework my curriculum, my strategies. Really, in a lot of ways, my pedagogy changed, and my classroom became, where it had been very teacher-centric, it shifted completely into a student-centric classroom where it could be almost self-sustaining if I wasn't fully present that day, which sounds crazy, but when you've got really great students and you train them to do that well, it's empowering.
Exactly.
So, but whenever my second came along, the game changed then. And I found that I was not able to juggle it all. And, it was like I had created a system to increase efficiency every single time things got more difficult, to improve my work-life balance and to be able to still completely be there for my kids and my family. But then I would be put on another committee or be given another responsibility. And then my second child was born, and it's like the scales tipped. And that same year, as I was still trying to nurse her all throughout the year, I was, like I said, not allowed to say no to a really big responsibility. And that became my breaking point, because I had come to them and said, guys, I have a newborn. I'm fully present. I'm here. I'm doing my job. But this extra job is not something that I can handle. It's not tenable this year. So I ended up resigning that year.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and it was this life-altering experience, because I didn't realize, even in the midst of my resignation, I did not realize how my entire identity, my family culture, had become completely intertwined with the culture of this elite school, and with the pride I had of teaching there and how much value that gave me and self-worth.
Right.
So, I was sitting at home being a stay-at-home mom, which at one point in my life I thought I would never do.
Right. Me too. It's odd.
Yeah, it's amazing how things change.
Absolutely.
And I realized that all of these things that I had held dear at the beginning of my marriage, the adventure, the travel, the service, community, connection, and really so much of my connection with my husband had been lost during that crazy, hectic pace of life.
Yes.
And, working 60-hour weeks and then having to go grade for hours and hours on end on the weekends. And
yes. Well, and I think for most of you listening, I'm sure that you can understand what Calli was going through, because we all kind of hit that point where our responsibilities tip over our work-life balance. And it's hard, especially if you're a mother, especially a mother of young children, to balance work and also meeting the needs of your family. So you walked away from that job and became a stay-at-home mom.
And basically started over.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, okay, what am I going to do with this life? And I have these two amazing, precious souls that depend on me. I've got this awesome husband that I have really neglected in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I hate using that word, but it's really true that we had so much of our connection had been lost during those years because there just wasn't that extra time.
Yeah.
And that whole next year, our focus was rekindling our love for each other, recentering our life's purpose and our family's purpose, and figuring out what that meant. So, and that's why living simply and cutting out the excess and having boundaries, all of that, so many things that you talk about in Cohesive Home resonate so deeply with me because that's what we ended up shifting to. I mean, we really did a 180 in so many ways. I mean, whenever a couple years later I told my prep school friends that I'm going to homeschool my kids. I mean, some people thought I was crazy, but I wanted that time, and I craved our family being together and having a culture of freedom. So, yeah. So that's our story, and then we ended up moving to Arkansas.
Right. Okay. And so that's kind of when we became friends, was when you moved to the small town in Arkansas, and I had recently moved to our small beach town. Yep. And so at that point you were staying at home and homeschooling your girls, but then late last fall you started a business.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about Storyweaver?
Sure. So when we moved to Arkansas, my husband had accepted, he ended up getting a PhD in criminology, and he had just finished his PhD, and he was offered this great professorship in this little town, small college town. And so we moved up here in May, not knowing a soul. And we quickly fell in love with not only the small town, but the natural beauty around us. Right. You know, Arkansas is called the natural state, and it fits it very well because it has so much natural beauty that I honestly wasn't aware of, even as a Texan, being such a short drive away. And we just spent the summer exploring all that Arkansas, well, not even all, I shouldn't say all, everything within about a 2 or 3 hour drive that Arkansas had to offer. There are still several things on our list that we haven't been able to visit yet that we are excited to in the future.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. But started a local adventure club, and we spent the whole summer hiking. So basically that's what I saw as, hey, we're going to just hike and explore, which we totally do still. And it's so important to me. Just being outdoors feeds my soul. And then it was early September, whenever the Syrian refugee crisis first started making the headlines. And in that season, I found myself just becoming so heartbroken over the plight of these mothers and children. And it brought up all of these emotions from whenever I had taught refugees in London. And I even wrote about it on my blog, and I was definitely processing.
I think I remember maybe an Instagram post where you said, you know, I feel so strongly about this, and I want to help, and I just don't know how.
That's it.
And then shortly after.
So I was just in this season of, how can I, in my little life, my little world with my small budget, I'm not going to be able to pick up. I've got these 2 wonderful children. I love homeschooling. I love my life. I love our adventures. I can't go across the globe and, you know, be there physically. What can I do? And I didn't have an answer for a long time, as far as just this deep desire to make a difference. And I feel like it had been dormant for many years, and it just became unearthed during that season. And it was something that had been a part of me a long time, but maybe I lost or forgot or got buried during those teaching years. And so I was pondering that, praying about that, didn't have any kind of answers. And Meanwhile, very separately, had nothing to do with that at all. It felt like very in its own little separate category of my life. I was brainstorming about how I could bring in some extra money for the family. I had a tutoring business in Dallas. Even after I resigned, I was connected with a lot of the families of the school, and I was able to do great tutoring. And so that had been, our supplement that had paid for some of the extras for our families, specifically like the dance lessons and being able to go on a little summer vacation and things like that. So, those two things didn't seem interconnected at all for me. But then what sounds so crazy, I think, is that what I believe the pivotal moment for me was when my daughter broke her foot in the fall.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
I do remember it, yeah.
So she broke her foot. And so what happened is we couldn't hike. And I had become kind of obsessed with going outdoors every single day that we could. Like, it's beautiful outside, let's go. And all of a sudden, she had to be off her foot for 6 weeks. And we were so sad about it. We thought, oh my goodness, we had all these hikes planned. I had to cancel all of our adventure club activities. And we had a lovely time at home. Right. And we loved being at home together. But we thought it was such a bummer. Well, 2 really significant things happened during that season of having to sit around at home because of her broken foot. One is that Ellie had been a struggling reader and kind of a late reader. And she basically learned to read during that time because
that is so amazing.
It was awesome. Yeah. Because she was just sitting there and couldn't really move a whole lot. And so she really, for the first several weeks, because she actually had 2 breaks in her foot. So for the first few weeks, her foot was it hurt. And so she didn't really want to move around or walk much or play much. And so she would just sit. And I encouraged her to try to read some of her easy readers. And she had a huge breakthrough, which was the most exciting thing for our family.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
It was very cool. And then the second thing was my parents came to visit, and I'd already mentioned my mom being an entrepreneur. And we, at some point, were talking about what I could do, and I could start this kind of business. She thinks she's always talking about some kind of business you can start. And at some point, she asked me very specifically, Calli, if you could create any kind of business that you could run from home while homeschooling your kids and that you would be passionate about, what would it be? And I don't think I'd ever really just thought big like that.
Yeah.
I had been given permission to think big like that. And so in that moment, I took her question really seriously, and I thought, what would I want to create? What would I want to do? And then all of a sudden, all of this time and energy and prayer that I had spent on how can I make a difference in the world? How can I impact and help the Syrian refugees and all of the people that are struggling and suffering across the world? It's like it just came to me instantaneously. And like this vision of Storyweaver just formed. And suddenly, as I was verbalizing it to my mom, the idea became so exciting. The idea of being able to partner with people who are making a difference in the world and in some of the most broken regions of the world, and being able to share their stories. And then I realized stories. That's what I'm about. I'm an English teacher and a writer. I thought retail is not me at all. This doesn't make sense. But then really I was raised in retail. I had worked retail for my mom, with my mom, all the way through college, from starting at like 8 or 9. So
oh my goodness.
It's kind of in my blood.
So you know it. I mean, you know it.
Very well. I started going to market with her when I was 9.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was basically my job as a high schooler and in college. And I actually managed one of her gift shops in college.
So but that's an amazing experience to help you grow your own business. I mean, what a blessing that you had that experience.
Exactly. But I never thought in a million years that I would go into retail.
Of course not.
I pretty much told my mom back when I was 21, 22, I'm never going to do this. I'm going to be an English teacher. That's my calling. So
yeah, isn't it funny the things that we say we'll never do, and then
especially at 21,
lo and behold, oh, I know.
It's so funny. So anyway, it's like I'd already told you how she said, okay, you either do this by Black Friday or do this in 9 months. And so I know that I'm a person who runs off a passion, and it's like this fire was lit, and I was so passionate about this new project, this concept, and I didn't want to wait. I wanted to make it happen.
Right.
So, really threw Storyweaver together. Storyweaver, that's the name of my business. And Storyweaver Mercantile in about 6 weeks.
Wow. That is impressive.
I became very consumed. I would homeschool in the morning and then spend all afternoon working. Again, we didn't go on our adventures. I was taking our adventure time.
Well, I'm sure your girls understood.
Well, they were
maybe a little.
Yeah, they were very ready to get outdoors again by the time the big boot came off.
Yes.
So that's really how it happened.
Wow.
And it all felt. I would never ever want to say that my daughter was supposed to break her foot. That sounds horrible. That makes me sound like such a bad mom. No. But I can say there was silver lining, and there was fruit from that season.
Yes, everything fell into line for that.
Are you looking for a book recommendation to help your family as you simplify and get your life focused on what matters? If so, check out the Cohesive Home Shop. That's where Kate and I have compiled some of our favorite resources to help you create your happier home. Find it on the Shop tab and our website.
So I absolutely love the products that you carry in your store. They are just so beautiful, and I love that they're handcrafted by artisans that you have sourced from around the world. And I feel like there is such a desire for those type of products, both feeling connected to the people who make them, and to also feel like maybe just in a small way we're making a difference with our purchases.
Right.
And so, Calli, I would love if you could maybe talk a little bit more about how our listeners could buy ethically and start shopping with purpose. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Kate, thank you so much for that compliment. I absolutely love working with the organizations that I'm privileged to be in partnership with. Some of them have been working hard for over 10 years on developing relationships with our artisans and working with the government in their countries, and have grown to become substantial businesses, social businesses, such as my organization Pebble that makes a little crochet toys out of Bangladesh, which something I'm going to talk about, I want to mention is the movie The True Cost, the documentary The True Cost. Have you seen that?
I actually haven't, but it's on my list. Yes. No,
yes. It's on Netflix.
Okay.
So, it's one of those, the night whenever you're in the mood to be engaged and just watch something good. It is challenging, but such a good documentary. Yeah. But they talk a lot about the conditions in Bangladesh and that being one of the worst countries as far as the treatment of garment factory workers. So I had originally put on my list that I wanted to work with an organization out of Bangladesh, and that's how I found Pebble. But Pebble has spread throughout all these little bitty villages all throughout Bangladesh, working with mothers mostly who don't want to have to leave their children behind to go into the big city to work in the garment factories, which a lot of them only see the child 1 or 2 times a year whenever they do that. So they teach them these crochet skills if they don't already know them. And they work in these little crochet circles where all the women in the village gather together and gossip and talk and share their meal. And their children are all scattered around them. It's the most beautiful thing. Yes. So anyway, and then some of my organizations are really new, actually almost in the startup stage. I'm the first of 3 of the organizations that I'm working with. And it's just been so neat to connect with people who are full of passion and purpose and are doing amazing things in the world, and creating a beautiful product. And they understand that a product needs to be marketable. And that there's a Western audience who's willing to spend their money on something of value that they, especially when they see that added value attached with a story and a purpose. But it needs to be cute.
Right? Bottom line.
Bottom line.
If I'm scrolling through your website, I want to see something cute.
Exactly.
And ethical.
Ethical. Exactly. And using their indigenous skills, it's so awesome when they're able to take these ancient crafts, such as like the block printing in India or the backstrap weaving in Guatemala, and turn it into still honoring that tradition and that craft and that skill, not changing it, but maybe changing the color palette a little bit, maybe encouraging them to use a specific kind of pattern whenever they're weaving that would appeal to a Western audience, because that in the long run is what's going to give them a sustainable income.
Right.
So anyway, I could talk about all of the amazing things that I could story weave, basically. That's what I'm doing.
Weave away.
Weave away. I could share the stories of these awesome people and organizations for a long time. So I'll stop now and just move on into the journey of trying to become ethical in our shopping habits. And it is a journey. And I think,
I'm still learning myself. I mean, I feel like there's so much that I could learn from you, and I'm so curious to hear your tips.
Oh my gosh. And see, I feel that same way about so many other people that bloggers that I've connected with through Instagram, who I think of as my gurus, you know. I've cared about this for a long time, but I can't say that I was an advocate until recently. Right. And I learned about fair trade back when my husband was getting his master's degree in London. But we were focusing more on sugar and coffee and chocolate.
Yes.
You know, and I knew a little bit about garment factories and working conditions, but it wasn't enough to change my heart. Yeah. I think. So I focused on fair trade with my food for a long time. And actually, it's interesting because I like to compare the journey of ethical buying habits, especially with our clothing and accessories, but really just everything, really even home goods, to the journey of clean living. Because once you kind of become convinced to become a convert, you realize there's so much to learn. Yes. And so the documentary, The True Cost, that was very similar to me, what Food Inc. had been to me.
Oh, that movie.
Years ago. I know. And it's starting me on a journey of saying, okay, I want to make these changes. This is a value of mine, and I want to stick with it and figure out what this means to live this way. And so just like I remember learning about the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, and about with clean cosmetics, learning about like the 5 most dangerous chemicals to avoid in our toiletries and cosmetics. So there's just kind of like these quick tips that you can have that right at the beginning that will help you. That kind of a rule of thumb. Okay. That will help you from the beginning. And so it'll help us avoid companies that are perpetuating the unethical standards in the garment industry, specifically the fast fashion industry, which really has only existed for like 15, 20 years.
And it's so huge. I mean, it's just everywhere, right?
Yeah. And that was the piece that I had never really sat and thought about. And once I watched The True Cost, and my eyes were open, but also I remembered it. I was a teenager in the 90s, and I remember the shift of when all of a sudden every week you could walk into a specific store and there'd be different items from the previous week. That's not the traditional fashion or really real standard of having a fall winter season and a spring summer season, and you have a collection that you work with whoever is your supplier, and it's a totally different paradigm,
right?
And that's part of what has perpetuated this problem. And so as far as like just rules of thumb, like know the top fast fashion retail chains and avoid them. It's really that simple.
Yeah.
And there's a handful of them that that's who they are. That's what they do. And so, once I was able to identify those chains, it was hard for me to want to shop there again. Actually, I didn't want to shop there again. It was kind of like whenever I found out about a certain kind of food or chemical that was unhealthy for my body, that I didn't want to use it again or consume it again.
Do you have a recommendation for a website that listeners could look at? Okay.
Yes, I do. So there are two websites I want to mention. The first one has a really great list on it, and they are continually adding into it. It's called The Good Trade.
Okay.
And another one that I just love is actually a database, and you can look up different brands, retailers, companies, and it's called Project Just.
Okay.
And that one's fabulous. They're both great. But Project Just was one of the first ones that I found that helped me navigate where I want to continue shopping and where I decided that I didn't want to vote with my dollars anymore.
Yes.
That's essentially what we're doing. And then the next piece for me, when you don't know anything about the brand, is to know the countries that have little to no workers' rights. So Bangladesh and Cambodia are the two worst last time I checked.
Right. Okay.
So I mentioned Bangladesh earlier. That's why I wanted to work with a fair trade organization in Bangladesh, because the workers have so few rights there. So if a garment is really cheap, or it's like, it's cheap, and it was made in one of these countries, you look on the tag, made in Bangladesh, made in Cambodia, it's likely that the reason the factory was moved to that country was to avoid human rights laws and to pay the bottom dollar.
So heartbreaking.
So, because they'll pick up. So there's countries that still have bad standards, China, India. They will be able to avoid some of the fees and regulations if they move to Cambodia or to Bangladesh. So
check your tags.
Check your tags. And so I personally no longer buy items from those two countries unless I know that I'm buying fair trade or I'm buying secondhand.
Okay.
So, and that's the next thing for me. I'm a huge secondhand shopper.
Me too.
I love it. I've always loved it. Going back a long time, actually, I find it thrilling. It's kind of a treasure hunt for me. So, I feel like it is extending the life of the garment and preventing it from ending up in a landfill. And we're being wise stewards of our resources. We can stretch our dollars so much further. And but then we don't really have to worry as much about the brands, the name on the tag, because you're not actually supporting that brand whenever you're buying secondhand.
And at that point, you're really just keeping it from entering the landfill by giving it another life.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's right.
I love that.
Okay, so this brings me to the point of just buying less. And y'all have talked so much about this.
It's the easiest thing to do, really.
It is. And it's minimalism. And this is a minimalist, or at least a community pursuing minimalism.
Minimalist-ish.
Minimalist-ish. So I don't technically capsule. And my sister-in-law, Caroline from Unfancy, some of you may know her, is the capsule guru. But she has inspired me in so many ways. I can't even enumerate them, and has been a huge influence on my shopping habits. I do have a small, very intentional wardrobe, but honestly, I don't want to spend the time on capsuling.
You know what? Honestly, I'm the same way, and I would say my whole wardrobe is like one capsule.
That's awesome.
I probably need to buy a few more pieces.
Well, and that brings me to when your wardrobe is intentional and you're not just going shopping as a way to spend time, as a leisure activity, which I think that's a big part of this, as our culture believes that shopping is like one of the best leisure activities, which is interesting if you think about it.
And it's really, it's probably at the bottom of my list. And I think that was before I became a minimalist. I never was really attracted to shopping. But now I feel like when I do go shopping, I actually enjoy it more because I shop so infrequently.
Absolutely. I feel the same way.
Yes.
I've never been a huge shopper. I did develop kind of an obsession with thrifting during one season of my life. That's the only type of shopping that I've ever, I started like buying things and selling them on eBay.
Did you really?
Because I was getting such
cool.
amazing. Well, because it was in Dallas, and you could find these designer, people wear them one time, and then they rotate their closet and dump it. And so I found amazing things, and it wouldn't be my size. That's how it started very organically. This is such a tangent. But anyway, the point is you can find some awesome things thrifting. But back to having a curated collection in your closet, this curated closet. I love that concept.
Tell us more.
Well, the thing is, you know what pieces you have, what works together, and what's missing. That one thing or two or three things that and like I have in my mind what my whole family needs. Like I have one or two things. My husband has one or two things, and each of my children. And that's really all that we need. And we have great wardrobes. They're just simple and streamlined. Yeah. So the cool thing about that is then you don't waste all this time walking through stores that wouldn't serve you well. And you're focusing on, okay, so my big, and I love this story too, because this just happened this morning, actually.
Okay.
My need has been a new denim jean jacket.
Ooh.
And I know. And my old one was from I haven't had one for a few years, but the one before was more structured, and I called it my teacher jean jacket, and I felt very much like a teacher in it. And so I want nothing like that. That is not the look I am going for at all.
Right.
And so, I had actually intentionally gone shopping with my mom to a couple places, and I was looking online. I even looked at the Madewell jacket, and I couldn't get myself to spend so much money, or I couldn't get myself to shop in a particular store. And so I really wanted to find something great secondhand. And so my mom called me this morning because she's known that I've been on the hunt, and there's this really great consignment shop that's a high-end consignment shop in Dallas. That's where all of the wealthy people just drop off their stuff, basically, and get a check.
Great place to go.
It's a great place to go. My mom calls it her best secret, her best wardrobe secret. So she had gone there yesterday, and so she called me this morning. She goes, "Guess what I found?" And I was like, "What is it?" And she said, "I found your jean jacket. I know it's perfect, and it's exactly what I was looking for." And the thing is that she wouldn't have known to look for a jean jacket if I hadn't been intentional in my shopping habits. So anyway, I'm excited to see this. I'm hoping it is indeed what I'm looking for, but she's got great taste. I bet it is.
So you'll have to take a photo and post it to Instagram.
I'll have to put it on Instagram.
Right. So we can all see it.
Approves of my jean jacket.
There you go.
So being intentional, knowing what you're looking for, so you're not just mindlessly shopping, buying things on sale because they're cute and random,
right.
Yeah. And then your money will go so much further. You can use it for that camping trip, or if you're investing in something really high quality, then it's going to last you for a decade,
Exactly. Yes.
And that's
such
how
good advice.
Leather goods are. They will last for so long if you buy high quality.
Right.
And so, you're paying more up front, but then, you can basically give it to your kids down the road.
Longevity is what
exactly.
matters, right?
And I know y'all spoke in a previous episode about buying items that are made in the USA, buying from independent shops and indie designers. I love doing that anytime I can support any kind of small local or Instagram shop. I'm all about that. So, and then the last thing is just to buy items from companies or organizations who are actively trying to do good. And this is something I'm actually really passionate about, that ethical is huge, and not doing harm is so important.
Right.
And I feel like when our eyes have been open to it, it's hard to turn away from it. But then there's another step of not just not doing harm, but actively doing good. And
that one's harder.
It is much harder. But when you find them, they tend to be organizations with a lot of passion. And they are driven by a purpose that's far outweighs the retail industry, the bottom dollar, the profit that they could gain. It is very clear that they're driven by something deeper and more meaningful, and a love and a passion for humanity. And wanting to care for their artisans. Yes. And so those kinds of organizations, and, I represent 12 organizations right now, but there are so many others out there that I think are doing just such amazing work. So, and again, I'll mention again, The Good Trade and Project Just are 2 places to look.
Okay. Thank you so much for those suggestions. And I think we could probably put those websites in the show notes so that if you're listening, that you can find those later.
Cool.
So, Calli, I have one more question for you before we wrap this up. And I think that this is something that you can really speak to. And I know a lot of our listeners struggle with this as well. So we've kind of talked a little bit before about balance, but I was just wondering about, like, in this current season of your life, what does it look like for you juggling a business with being a homeschool mom as well as a wife? How do you do it all? And go.
I don't do it all. That's
right. The secret's out.
No, so I really mean that. My husband's the chef in the family, and I have to say I'm so spoiled because of that. And he's an amazing cook. It is. He is, and so I am treated to a fabulous meal every night that he came home and cooked for us. So I have to just totally come out and say I don't do it all, and I never want to have that facade. I have an amazing family who supports me in so many ways. But I guess I would answer by first just saying keeping it simple. Anytime I feel like it's getting too complicated, it's probably going to be something that I can't sustain. I know myself well enough. I know that I can create something elaborate, but in the long run, that may like one of those chore charts, for example. You know, it's the kinds of things that will have 5 stickers on them, and then I will look at it. Actually, I was organizing my desk and cleaning it up so that we could have this podcast interview tonight, and I found one of these little journals where you have to write something down every single day. I had
one of those.
And I felt this overwhelming sense of guilt.
Of course, yeah.
I was like, oh, because this was such a cool concept. And oh my gosh, it's 1 sentence a day.
Right. It's just too much. It's just too much. Yeah. Know your limits.
Oh my goodness. So, so if a rhythm in our family that is simple and that is sustainable, and knowing my strengths, I think that's huge. Like for me, I could read aloud to my kids all day long, and that's what I love. And I love the humanities. And so I was an English teacher, obviously. So I get really excited about trying to introduce Shakespeare to my kids or, things like that. And then
that's
I love
great,
picture.
though. Mm-hmm.
So I'm catering to my strengths, but of course, trying to cover all of the bases. So we get math done quickly in the morning because I know that there's possibility of it getting maybe not the attention it should receive. Now,
I worry about that one.
My husband has taken over half of the math lessons, though. So again, I don't.
That's great.
This was his offering to me this year. I mean, he just suggested it, and I'm like, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Right.
So, and he's like this stats genius. So I mean, it's so good for my kids too.
And it's so good that you two can balance each other. That you both have your different strengths, and you can bring those to parenting.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think. I don't know if you've ever seen my blog post where I talk about my daily themes in homeschooling, how I have a little theme for every day. And this is something I worked out from the early on because I did something similar back when I taught as well. And I knew that was something that would give me that daily focus that was good for me. And so that has worked so well. It's actually been one of our favorite parts of our homeschool life has been our daily themes. And so I've done something kind of similar for Storyweaver. So we get homeschool done by kind of, I would say we try to aim for lunch, but it's usually after lunch. I would say it's 2 most days.
Okay.
And then I work in the afternoons on Storyweaver, and I kind of have my daily theme, my daily activity that I try to get. I mean, every day I've got to respond to emails and things like that. and I've got to get things shipped out, but I'm able to keep it pretty focused that way. And I remember y'all talked several episodes back about planners.
Yes.
We
love them.
I know. And that resonated with me because I hadn't found my planner, my perfect planner yet.
Okay.
When we did that episode. And I finally found it. And it's kind of humorous because it's identical to what my school planner was. And the school had provided school planners.
Like the academic planner?
Academic planners, and they ordered them from some company, and it was a real specific kind of layout. And that was my life. I remember thinking one time, if someone were to break into my car, they could steal my laptop, they could steal my purse, but don't steal my planner.
You know what, Calli? I have to tell you, you're gonna laugh, but when I taught high school, obviously I'm a little bit of a minimalist. I would hoard those. I loved those planners. And after I quit, I had a friend at the school and she would snag me one. That's probably totally unethical. I probably shouldn't say that. But because I just loved them so much. So if we could find a supplier, maybe we could offer those on your website or our website.
I honestly just bought this one from Target. It was like one of their end cap displays that had really cute stationery, like gold foil, adorable. And I don't even know who makes it. I'll have to go look and tell you. But the layout is identical. And I have tried to my school planner back years ago. And I had tried, I think, 3 every year. I've bought a new one since, and this is I'm entering into my 4th year since I'm not teaching. And so this is the first one that's stuck. So I'm really excited about it. So find a planner that works for you.
Good advice always.
Yeah. And then I think the biggest thing for me is to try to wake up before the kids and give yourself some quiet time in the morning.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be something super structured, but just something that's for you, whatever that is, whatever that means for you before you get into the daily grind.
Yes, those are such good words of wisdom.
Oh. So I don't know if it's wisdom, but it's what I figured out.
You've earned it, right? You have figured it out. Well, I think that is about it for my questions. But before we wrap this up, I wanted to let everyone listening know that we actually have a giveaway with Calli and Storyweaver going on through Instagram. So I wanted to make sure that you check that out. We're very excited about it, so you don't want to miss it. Calli, it was so much fun chatting with you tonight, and I just loved hearing your story. Thank you so much for sharing it with our community.
Oh, it was so awesome, Kate. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
And thank you so much to all of you who are listening. Melissa and I would love to hear what you think of the new interview series, so leave us a review on iTunes or comment on Instagram. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend. That's it for Cohesive Home Interview 1. We'll see you next time.